Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella, Herrera. Maricella, how is it going these days?
Hey, Kristy. It's going well. Can't complain about that. How are you? Big, exciting times that we're living in.
Yes, it is exciting times, and I keep saying my word for 2021. We'll have two. One is hope. Very hopeful for the year ahead, and you know, being able to make progress. I've seen so much within our community that support and inspiration, and I am giving myself grace because I've certainly, I think, held myself to an unreasonable standard the past couple of months, and I'm trying to just let go of some of that so that I can move forward myself. So good times. It is good. I mean, I think it's always important to have that self-reflection and then also be inspired by, some of what's happening in our world, which for many of us, when you look at job losses and pandemic, racism, and what's been happening, what happened at the Capitol, that there's a lot to be saddened by, but then you read the stories of those that are using their voices, speaking up, creating change, and really, collectively looking to unify us and bring us forward, and that inspires me.
Hope and grace are very powerful words. I like that. I think it's very important. I know I've been struggling with the hope part and the grace part. I don't know what my words for 2021 would be. I haven't even thought about this, but this is a good exercise. I'll have to think it through. Did you watch the inauguration? Speaking of hope and grace.
Yeah, I mean, of course, yes. Kamala, it was just amazing. I like chills, and it was inspirational. I been watching videos with my girls and talking about it, and with my son. My son's entire middle school, 1,500 kids, all watched virtually the inauguration together and had a lot of important discussions around it and around history and the democratic process. So it was a big day in our household, and we also, Amanda Gorman, the poet laureate, was just
incredible,
incredible. And so at 11 o'clock last night before I went to bed, I rewatched her poem because it was, I wanted to end the day on that note and with those words, and it was very powerful.
Yeah. I think we're all kind of looking at 2021 and the big things that have already happened. I mean, I can't believe we're like 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, and it seems like, I don't know, it feels like a long year to me already. Hope is a good word to use, I think.
Yeah, I am. And I mean, I could add more because as we're talking, I just think, I'm thankful for my family and for you, Maricella, for the people in our community, for our podcast guests. Our guest today, Megha Desai, is just, she's one of the people I'm talking about when, we look to those leaders that are, identifying challenges or opportunities and how they best solve those problems, and the work that she and the Desai Foundation are doing around, providing living wage, empowering women and children, health and livelihood. It's awe. I'm in awe because I think, and maybe this is more personal for me, but so much lately I've been pondering this concept of legacy and, what are we on this earth to do? How do we make sure we take advantage of every moment to do it, to not just look at ourselves and our families and our companies, but our communities and society, and what role do we play in being an active participant in that and creating change and supporting others in creating change. And that's a big foundation for this podcast, which, it's Women Changing the Face of Business. We started because we had heard from so many in our community that the path forward was unclear. And they were looking for inspiration of other women, and how did they go about their career and lives? How did they fail and succeed? What lessons have they learned, and how do they keep moving forward? How do they find that purpose? And it's been over the past couple of years, as we've been having these conversations every week, that I've come to really realize that there's no right answer. There's so many ways for each of us to have that purpose, to have that impact. And just hearing from these stories, it keeps me, again, hopeful about the progress that we'll see made, because we have, untold numbers of people, including these amazing women, who are every day working hard to see that change.
I love that. And it's true. And, not just with the podcast, but with looking at our community, looking at some campaigns like Raise Her Voice, which we are currently in our voting period. If you want, go to Raise Her Voice. Rex is at Raise Her Voice 2021.
Yeah, that is so true. And, on that note, Maricella, we also want to talk about move forward. How are we moving forward during this time and into the future? I know personally, it doesn't happen alone. Every day I'm looking for inspiration. I'm looking for advice. I'm just looking for different perspectives. I've talked so much about the power of curiosity and diversity of thought and experience. And we encourage you, we welcome you to be part of the Ellevate community, where we've developed programs wherever you are in your career, if it's from an individual contributor, business owner, senior executive, or in career transition. We've got you. We've got your back. We also, Maricella is running our managers program, our roundtable. But when you think about Ellevate, think of it as your hyper local community, your weekly touch point with peers who are going through similar challenges and struggles, going after the same dreams and opportunities, and how you hold each other accountable, give each other that advice, and collectively move forward. We also have Mobilize Women, which we've talked about so much on the podcast. It's a powerful conversation that helps expand our minds and mobilize our community to take action in the workplace and in the world. And our Squads program. Applications are starting at the beginning of February, where you can join our 12-week-long program. Peer mentoring, half an hour a week, highly impactful. Over 80% of participants have said they're more confident in their career. And that's something I think we all need right now. The past couple months have been hard. We've all been shaken. I've certainly have lost some confidence. And that's why I'm committed to giving myself some grace and some hope as we move forward. But I also am committed to giving myself that support, that mentoring, that advice, because I aim to make 2021 my year. I want it to be all of our years as we move forward from this time. And what better way than to do it together? We are moving forward. Well, let's get to my conversation with Megha so we can be inspired by someone who is really creating that progress and change that's helping others and creating huge impact in the lives of others. Megha, thank you so much for joining us today on the Ellevate podcast. It is a great honor to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here. I listened to the pod.
So I would really appreciate just hearing a little bit more about you and your story, how you got to where you are today. I know you wear many hats and you are just a truly inspirational person who is creating change across business in the world. And so it's, I'm sure, just a really inspiring story, but to hear it in your own word would be the best way to share it. So we would love to hear all about you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I am from Massachusetts, and the suburban Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. Came to college in New York City and started working in advertising. I worked in advertising, corporate advertising, for about 15 years. Worked at some of the best shops on some of the best brands, and had a successful career. I think it was an awesome opportunity. I learned a lot, and I met some of the best people. But there was just something missing towards the end of that tenure. And if I'm being honest, I didn't really know what it was. So I actually spent the last 3 years jumping from shop to shop trying to figure out what exactly it was. And at first, I think my instinct was to say, oh, I've outgrown this company. It's time for me to shift companies. Then I thought to myself, oh, it's the type of clients that I'm working on. And then finally, I came to the conclusion that it was the industry itself, which was a hard pill to swallow, frankly. I think I resisted that coming to that conclusion for quite some time, simply because I had wrapped up so much of my identity and my success in working in advertising and with these brands and these companies. And so I ventured off on my own. And I thought, well, let me first try to define what it is that I'm really looking for. And so I shifted a little bit to continue to work in branding and marketing, but focused more on young brands, startup brands, and impact brands. And so I ran a small company called Marketing Strategy Dharma for about 5 years. And it was actually lovely to be able to work with clients that were willing to experiment, try new things, try new ways of partnering with organizations. And that is kind of where I started to lean much harder into the impact space. I'd always been involved in causes, political causes or social causes my whole life, but this is a kind of new professional lens that I was seeing for the first time. And while this was all going on, my parents had started a nonprofit, and it was originally a small private family foundation doing typical things, writing small checks to organizations that they thought were doing a good job. And ultimately, I got a little involved in helping make decisions, helping to shift some of the programming. And about 6 years ago, we found ourselves in a position where, I kind of always equate this to a startup, right? So you have an idea, you bring in your friends and family round, and then you go and you build your MVP. And so as we were building our most viable product, we ended up with 20. And what that meant was 20 different programs that we could implement and scale on the ground in rural communities in India. And once we came to this conclusion, we thought to ourselves, well, we're not really equipped, kind of this tiny little nonprofit to expand and grow this on our own. So we actually shifted from being a family foundation to being a public nonprofit. Not a shift I advise, just shut the company down and start a new one, which is that I learned that the hard way. But, we started building out this nonprofit. And so if I'm being frank, I wish I could tell you that my entree into this industry was like well thought out, but it really wasn't. The board of directors that we had assigned, to join the board, we started on this long search for an executive director. We interviewed probably a dozen, very well qualified candidates. But for all the candidates that had that 10, 20-year tenure in the nonprofit world, they didn't have that innovative tenacity and creativity and willingness to fail that an entrepreneur has. And since my father and I are both entrepreneurs, that's just like how we know how to operate. So we just couldn't find anyone. So for 1 year, I said, okay, guys, I will do this for 1 year. Ultimately, we'll find someone more qualified, somebody that's had more experience in the nonprofit space, and they'll take over and run the organization. That was 4 years ago, and I am still running the organization today, and actually couldn't be more thrilled about it. It's the hardest job I've ever had. It's the best job I've ever had, and it is one of those experiences where you realize that you are prepared for a lot of roles that you think that you're not prepared for. A life, a career of 15 years in anything prepares you for what's next. And so that is kind of the journey of my professional career.
Oh, wow. Well, so thank you so much for sharing that story. And so you're still founder and CEO of Dharma, and then also the board director at the Desai. Am I saying that correctly? Desai Foundation?
Yep, that's right. Desai.
And how do you balance the two? And is it a balance? Like, are they more integrated with each other? Because I know in the marketing capacity, you're talking about social impact and you're talking about doing work that's really changing the world. And so it sounds like are good synergies there. But, oftentimes I hear from people like, oh, how do you, be on a board and also run a company and also, be an advisor? And it feels like it's so much work. But I think when there's intersection between them, it becomes something very beautiful.
Yeah. So I am the president of the Desai Foundation, and I also have a seat on the board. But as president, I don't vote just because there's conflict of interest. So my board seat is a little bit a vanity plate right now, just because it's the right thing to do. But I am the fully operational president of the Desai Foundation. So that is my current full-time job. MSD, I did try to run for about 2 years. I tried to do both at the same time, and I wasn't successful at that. I do still advise here and there, but I'm not operationally taking on clients anymore when it comes to the marketing company. I definitely I sit on a lot of advisory boards and things like that, where my role is focused on marketing. So it is how I get to flex that muscle still. But you're right. There is always going to be synergy in deep passions. So I do think that the boards that I get invited to sit on are generally, impact forward. So that really helps to bring the two together. But yeah, my full focus right now has been on the Desai Foundation and then a little bit on singing. But that's more kind of my personal fun. But yeah, that's really what I'm focused on.
And how is that transition going from, more of the corporate realm to the nonprofit realm? Oftentimes, we have conversations with professionals who want to follow that route and aren't sure if that is the right fit for them or how that transition works. What were your experiences?
Well, I think there are highs and lows to that shift. I think the first thing was I no longer care about working hours. Like I work all the time and it doesn't bother me. Of course, every so often I'll have a day where I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted. I wish I didn't have to work today. But overall, I think that we think that corporate people work really hard and they do, don't get me wrong. But I wake up thinking about the people I serve. I go to bed thinking about the people I serve. And so it's a whole different, investment. It's not just my pocketbook and my brain. It's like my whole body. And that was a transition that I was not expecting. That one kind of hit me. So that was, one thing, but I also take that as a positive. Like I really enjoy that, being fully, totally invested in something that I'm dedicating my time to. The harder pill to swallow in this shift has been around metrics. In the corporate world, your metrics are relatively clear. You're either selling something or you're raising funds or you're, generating revenue. And so, when you're succeeding. And what's been tricky around the impact space is that everybody has their opinion about what your impact should look like and how it should be measured. And so it's been this constant balancing act of how do we accurately report numbers? How do we also honor the people we serve that say, okay, we understand that not every woman that we're teaching a skill to is getting a job. However, they don't want jobs, all of them, right? So it's about also listening to the people we serve. It's about saying, oh, are we cultivating dignity? It's about choosing your own metrics for the people that you serve. And that was a windy path for me. I'm not going to lie. That was a windy path. And I think it's actually why I ended up doing the TED Talk that I did, because it was kind of this pivotal moment for me to come to terms with what are we going to honor as the metrics that guide us. And so that to me has been a curious journey. Oh, and then the last bit is, man, fundraising is a skill and it is a learned art form. And for someone to just kind of waltz from the corporate world into the nonprofit world without that foundation and education, I can tell you that fundraising is hard. And I'm still learning every day because I don't think that I'm the best at it. But I just wanted to tip my hat to all those professional fundraisers out there because it is hard.
I know. Well, and especially, I mean, as an aside, I mean, I think during the past couple months or year, many of the fundraising vehicles have changed, and it's no longer maybe some of the events or galas or traditional means. And I know fundraising, there's, consumer, donor from fundraising, there's foundations, and there's many fundraising vehicles. But, you had mentioned earlier this, looking for innovation, looking for a leader of the organization that had that entrepreneurial spirit and innovation. And that, is not always seen as going hand in hand with the nonprofit space. And so, if you look at fundraising, but you also look about, disruptive or innovative ideas to solve the problems for your stakeholders and to create that impact. How do you, ensure that you're always leaning on that entrepreneurial spirit through the work that you do? And have you, had any learnings about how to best bring entrepreneurial and innovative spirits into the nonprofit space?
Yeah, the first part of that is I am entrepreneurial by nature. So I think that lends itself to how I apply skills to anything I do. But the other big factor here is bringing other people like that to the table. One of the things that I've really worked hard to do is making sure that our funders, our investors are also highly innovative, highly entrepreneurial, because then they're willing to go on the journey with you. We have a few hardcore institutional funders, but not that many. Simply because, let's be frank, I'm not great at selling to those types of people. So for me, I have to use the tools that I have to my disposal, and that's why a lot of my investors are other entrepreneurs, and so they're able to see what we're doing, understand the impact we're making, see that we are going to fail, and we are going to shift and adapt along the way. One of the programs that we were working on, we started and then we weren't satisfied with where we were 6 months later. And we shut the whole program down and restarted the whole program after 6 months of research. And what was so nice is that the investors that we had for that program trusted us. And they said, you know what, you're right. It didn't head in the direction we wanted, but we're going to stick by you because we believe that you're going to figure it out. And so it's really about bringing like-minded people to the table that can fill knowledge gaps as well as help push your agenda forward.
Are there other lessons you've learned during this time personally as a leader, helping to steer a company and an impact? And it sounds like you're supported and you're working alongside some really spectacular people who are, innovating and solving these problems. And that's exciting, and it's exciting to see where that leads. But for you personally, what would have been your learnings?
Gosh, I think we've all had quite a few learnings this year. I think professionally, one of my learnings has been not a great one. I have really struggled as a manager in a Zoom world. I didn't really understand how reliant I am on body language, on interpersonal connectivity. I haven't been to India. I'm usually in India 3 times a year. I'm able to touch and interact with the people that I work with, the work that we do, really, really be with those people immersed for days on end. And even with my team here. And so I asked for a lot of grace. I was able to identify this problem about 4 months into the pandemic and talked to my team about it and said, listen, I realize that I'm kind of failing here on this thing because I'm not able to see what you need. And it's because I didn't realize how reliant I was on body language to tell me information about the people I work with. And so that was something that I learned and I'm still continuing to learn about. So that was just, one bit. The second thing I learned was we can get really, really easily tunnel visioned into solving a problem and thinking that it is, the world will end if we don't solve this problem and putting so much importance on it. And don't get me wrong, the work we do is very important. But what I did in building some of these programs. By the way, I haven't told you about the 2 other programs that we tried to create over the pandemic that failed miserably, right? So like we had one success, one failure, and one we're kind of like still trying to see if it's going to work. But it was so tunnel visioned that I forgot to use my support system. I forgot to take the time to have those catch ups with my girlfriends that are so inspiring to me. I forgot to, do those kind of self-care rituals. I forgot because I kept saying to myself, oh my God, everybody is suffering in the world. I'm in such a position of privilege. I can't complain. I can't do anything. I just need to get to work. And I totally lost sight of keeping myself healthy. And that's something I'm still unwinding from. I had this realization a little later than I would like to admit. And so that is something that I've learned a lot is having to just make sure that we take care of ourselves. And if I may, the last bit that I think I've learned has been around trust. Really trusting, and which is something that's been tarnished for us, especially living in the United States, right? Like this idea of trusting the institutions and trusting our leadership, and just the value of trust, and how trust is something that is constantly earned and constantly cultivated. And so it was interesting to watch the local governments in India and see the way that they were able to build trust. And I shudder to think that if I tried to execute the program in the US, I'm not so sure it would have gone as well. And so that was an interesting revelation I had about really being critical around the trusted institutions and the trusted relationships that you have and what you can rely on.
I mean, on that note, healthcare is a big topic in the US and globally. Access to healthcare. I mean, also access to, a living wage, to economic opportunity. And you're playing a big role in those spaces. How do you see, I guess what I'm asking is like, how do you personally, or you as the organization, look to influence policy, or do you, and see the potential of shifting policy to then support the communities you serve, or do you see it as something separate?
Yeah, there are a lot of amazing organizations, both in India and the United States, that are focused on shifting healthcare policy. That is not something that we are super sharp at. So we kind of keep our nose to the ground and do the work that we know how to do best, which is bringing health access and awareness to the people we serve. And so that to me is quite separate of an issue, although it is something that we've started thinking about for one of our programs, especially around menstrual health, and that potentially in the future could be something we focused on.
Megha, I would love to end this conversation, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I'm just incredibly inspired by you and your work, with a little lightning round to get to know you better.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you some questions, and would love it if you would just answer in a few words, a sentence. So, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I am an introvert wrapped in extrovert's clothing.
This is always my favorite question because we get a lot of very unique answers. I mean, we're not all, one size fits all. I think we're all very different and present very different. So that was a great response. Could you explain an introvert wrapped in extrovert clothing?
Yes. So I like people. I like being around people. I enjoy talking to strangers and doing all that good stuff. But for me, being an introvert or an extrovert is a little bit like what charges your battery and what depletes your battery. And being around people does deplete my battery. So I do require quite a bit of time to recover and recharge to then re-engage with the world. And then those moments that I'm engaged with the world, I'm all in and I'm there and I'm connected and I'm present and I'm all the good things and I'm vocal and I'm talkative. But when I turn off, man, do I turn off. And so to me, that is this kind of like push and pull with the requirement of charging my battery, but then also kind of being personable and talkative and curious.
What is your favorite day of the week?
Weirdly, lately, it's been Tuesdays because it's our internal days where I only interact with the team. I don't take any external meetings on Tuesdays. So it's like just being with the team, building and working really closely together. And so lately it's been Tuesdays.
What is are you an early bird or a night owl?
I'm a recovering night owl. So recently I've been pushing really hard to wake up earlier and earlier.
Who would be your dream dinner guest?
My grandfather, Anantrai, is the one grandparent that I never got to meet. And the way that the village that he is from talks about him, I dream about meeting him all the time. Frankly, all of my grandparents, I just miss them all. I would love to have dinner with my grandparents.
What is your pet peeve?
So sadly, I have many, but lately it's been political hypocrisy and anti-vaxxers. I also really cannot stand loud chewers.
Yes. What would be your Monday morning staple? What do you need to get your week off to a good start?
So Mondays are the days that I have just like a very naughty breakfast. So I have just like all of the yumminess that you can imagine in a naughty breakfast. It's the only day of the week I allow myself to do it, but I feel like it's the right way to fuel me for the week.
I'm curious, what do you consider a naughty breakfast?
Oh, like French toast or bacon, egg, and cheese or just bacon, yumminess.
Bacon. What is your favorite recent read?
Yeah, so I tend to read really nerdy business books almost exclusively, but I've been my sister and my dad have been trying to encourage me to read less nerdy business books. So I recently read The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur, and it was really, really moving.
And finally, is there a final thought you want to leave with our listeners as we close out this conversation?
Yeah, I love that. Every business has an impact. It's not just the folks that work in the social sector or that run B Corps or nonprofits that have an impact. You just got to think about the type of impact you want to leave in the world. And whether you're thinking about it from an individual perspective or from a company perspective, the kind of question that I want everybody to ask of themselves is, is what we're doing or is this company cultivating dignity for others? And is it cultivating dignity for you? And I think if we all remember that dignity is this abundant resource that we all have the responsibility to share with one another. I can't take your dignity, but I can diminish it. I can't give you dignity, but I can help you earn it. And I think the world would just be a little bit better if everyone just did one thing a day to try to cultivate dignity for somebody else.
That is perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Ellevate podcast. It was wonderful to meet you, to hear your story, and to have this important conversation.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes, give us 5 stars, and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Ellevate NTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.
92% of households that start the year with Peloton are still active a year later.
92% because of a bike?
not just bikes. We also make treadmills and rowers.
Oh, let me guess, for elite athletes only, right?
Nope. It doesn't matter if you're an avid exerciser or new to working out. Peloton can help you achieve your fitness goals. 92% stick with it. So can you. Try Peloton bikes, tread or row risk-free with a 30-day home trial. New members only. Not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial.